Welcome to the webinar. This week we're doing Retail Metrics Sell-Through Percentage. My name is Donna Wesley Rogers. I'm the Director of Marketing and Public Relations for One Step Retail Solutions. If you so desire, you can tweet about this presentation at #RetailMetrics on Twitter. The webinar this morning is sponsored by Retail Smart Guys, which Dan will tell you more about, but also sponsored by One Step Retail Solutions. We are your retail technology service providers. We've been doing that for over 27 years now, almost since there was such a thing as technology for retailers. We've installed over 6,000 stores on retail management systems. We currently support over 3,600 stores, and we pride ourselves in the fact that we're not just technology guys. All of our staff have retail backgrounds, some of it very extensive, before they came to One Step. And then, of course, we've got analysts that have been with us for 15, 16, 17 years, working with retailers in implementing the technology systems into their stores. So we know what we're doing, and we would love to help you. So this morning, I'm going to introduce to you Dan Jablon, as I have in weeks past, to remind you that Dan worked himself in retail while attending The Ohio State University. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Marketing and Production, and he has worked with a stellar list of retailers such as Walmart, Target, JCPenney, American Apparel, Donna Karan, Jimmy Choo, Charles David, Diesel, Oakley, Toomey, Hollywood Bowl, and many others. He's worked for a clothing manufacturer where he piloted vendor-managed inventory programs, a leading point-of-sale provider, us, where he helped install systems and provided merchandising, helping retailers large and small, and also very experienced in internet marketing, has helped retailers establish presence on the web. And the secret thing you should know about Dan, if you didn't already, is that he has a background in improvisational theater, has performed with comedy troupes all across the U.S. Recently, last season, appeared on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Dan combines his extensive knowledge of retail with his comedy skills to become one of the most popular industry speakers. He's spoken at Magic and at local municipal and trade show events, many other venues. And so, Dan, I will turn this over to you and change the screen to you. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. Continuing our series where we're talking about key performance indicators, and today we're going to talk about sell-through percentage. This is probably one of the ones that people look at most often, and I think it's one of the ones that when you talk to your vendors, they look at most often. We'll talk a little bit about talking to vendors about sell-through percentage. But it's a great one because it's a real good way to measure the velocity at which you're actually moving through the inventory that you've brought into your store. And I think it's an important one from that aspect. It's an important statistic when you start thinking about things like how do I increase my turns? How do I make sure that I'm selling the right merchandise? How do I know that what I bought is resonating with my marketplace and that people are really enjoying what I put on the floor? And how do I make sure that I'm actually getting the dollars out of my investment that I put into my retail store? So let's go through that. Let's go through this one like we always do. Okay. As always, I always start with this quote: "You cannot improve what you do not measure," from Lord Kelvin. You know, someone asked me this week. I'm still researching to find out when he said that. I don't know when Lord Kelvin said it. I have no idea. I wasn't at his house when it happened, but I can tell you that it's the most important. I think one of the most important quotes there are for business. You can't improve what you do not measure, and it especially comes up in retail stores where you know, you feel like you're on the floor. You're there every day, so. Quote, "I know what's going on," close quotes. Well, you may know what's going on, but you know, it's different if you actually start to look at some of those statistics and you look at what's happening there numerically. I find most often after all these years of talking to independent retailers that when you talk about statistics and you talk about what's going on the floor, people generally remember the last sale, they remember the worst customer service experience, they remember the best customer service experience. But that's not a way to measure your store, and it's not a way to improve what's happening there. So thank you, Lord Kelvin, for that quote. I use it all the time. You've got to look at the things statistically, as well as what your own memory of it is, or whatever stories you hear from your people on the floor, that sort of thing. Okay? All right. So today we're talking about sell-through percentage. So defined as how much of the inventory that was available to be sold was sold. How much of it did we actually sell through? Okay. The formula for that is what are our total net sales, which means sales less returns, divided by the end of period inventory plus whatever inventory we've added. Okay. So this is a question of what time frame you're looking at sell-through. You could look at it weekly, monthly, seasonally, that kind of thing. So wherever you ended your inventory at the end of the last period, plus whatever you've net added this period, net of obviously returns to vendor, that sort of thing. Okay, and for those of you that are multi-store, also net of transfers in, transfers out, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's basically what did I have that my customers could have bought from me, and how much of that did I actually sell through? Obviously, we're looking for the highest percentage here, again, without losing sales, because if you sell through too quickly, your customers didn't get a chance to buy in, didn't get a chance to enjoy that merchandise, didn't get a chance to have it, and you may have missed some sales, and you may have been broken up in size or colorways because you had too little inventory on the floor. So you do want a good, healthy sell-through percentage, but you don't want it to be so fast that you end up not servicing your entire client base. Okay? All right. So here's an actual example. In September, we sell 150 pieces. At the end of month of August, I had 500 pieces on hand, and in September, we got another 100 pieces in. So that meant that my total inventory available to my customers in the month of September was 600 pieces. I sold 150 of those 600 pieces, therefore I had a 25% sell-through percentage. It'd be interesting for me to know, actually, as you guys look at this thing, whether or not you feel that's a good percentage or a bad percentage. I certainly have some thoughts for you on that one, but just think about that as we go through this. Like, what do you consider to be a good sell-through percentage from your own, looking at your own stores and your own inventories and that sort of thing, okay? All right, so how do we use it? Well, first off, we want to identify those that are selling quickly so we can get back into those inventories if we can. Now, I recognize that in this day and age, as we record this exact webinar today, that can be a heated discussion because a lot of vendors today with the shift in the economy are pretty much cutting to order. So sometimes it's hard to get back into inventory when you see something that's selling well. But I would continue to ask that question though when you discover that something's selling well. The reason is that, again, because of what's happening in the economy, while vendors are cutting to order, sometimes they do have cancellations. Sometimes someone goes on credit hold and can't be shipped. Sometimes there are production mistakes and additional goods are manufactured. So don't give up on that. Don't give up so quickly on that one. Ask that question. Ask it a lot. Get on a waiting list for goods if you can get on a waiting list. Sometimes you'll be surprised at what's there. You might also ask them, maybe they've got something that's unbelievably similar that might also sell through the same way. Okay. At the same time, you're going to want to identify some slow sellers and figure out what we're going to do about that. Certainly, you can have that discussion with the vendor, but maybe it's in a bad location in the store, and it needs to be moved a little bit more front and center. Maybe it's not getting its moment in the sun, or maybe your staff doesn't know about it, or worse, I've seen this a bunch of times, maybe your staff doesn't like the goods, and so therefore they're not offering them. Sometimes we've had it in the action sports industry where a buyer has brought in a brand that the guys on the floor didn't think was cool and so didn't want to sell it. While I understand, there are certainly brand loyalties and there are things that go along with that, you want to make sure that your staff's own personal opinion is not affecting your store's sales along those lines, and sometimes you've got to remind them that they're there to sell the merchandise, not to offer opinions about it. But you got to identify the slow ones too, because they're still goods that are on your floor, and they are goods that you need to be able to sell through, get your cash out of, and buy back into things that are selling well. So if they're starting to go slow, then you want to make sure that you figure out some of the reasons why, and that you work through those. Also, people look at this thing often on a monthly basis. Sometimes people look at it on a weekly basis. It's also important to look at it on a seasonal basis. And when you look at it on a seasonal basis to evaluate how that vendor did, I like to look at it on a department level by vendor, and I like to look at how much they sold at full price versus how much I have to sell in markdowns. Don't forget that, sometimes when you look at sell-through, if you look at it on a unit basis only, what you're not looking at is, yeah, I sold, maybe I sold through 85% or 90% of what I sold, but I didn't get full margin on those goods. And I have some interesting things for you to look at a little later in this webinar about that. But as you evaluate this, you want to evaluate not only your unit sell-through, but maybe did you get all the margin you wanted to get out of it. I like to look at the sell-through on a seasonal basis, especially as you're getting ready to buy another season. Maybe you're getting ready to buy summer, or you're getting ready to buy fall. I like to look at what we did last summer, last fall with that vendor, and I like to look at it by department or class, because I like to look at things like, well, okay, I did great in tops with that vendor. I did lousy in bottoms. So maybe I only buy tops from them and I don't buy bottoms. Or I go in thinking that. That doesn't mean, you're going to get inside the showroom and see something amazing and go, you know what, I'm going to give them another shot because this is pretty good. You have to think of it that way. So I would watch for those things. I'd watch for what kinds of inventories on a departmental basis sold well or didn't sell well, and why, and should that affect my buy going forward. Okay? All right, so using the stats to improve your business, well, certainly vendor discussions are an important part of that. Now look, vendors want to know what your sell-through is. It helps them figure out what they're doing right and wrong. So as you consider your relationship with your vendor, if something is selling through well, tell them. If it's not selling through well, tell them. They want to know. And here's the thing that you may not know about your vendors, or even your sales reps within your vendors. They often get called to attend meetings where they have to talk about what they think they should produce in fall 2013 or spring 2014. I mean, they're asked to sort of help predict what they should produce and what the line should look like that far out. And so your input to them is incredibly valuable to them. So don't think you just call them about, what's not working or what or to get market appointments or that kind of stuff. Call them up and tell them what's working and what isn't working. And to the degree that you provide that information well, is to the degree that they will consider you a bellwether store, which just means a store where they can use the data that comes from your store as a good prediction as to how they're going to do in the market that season. And if they consider you to be a bellwether store or a store that actually does that kind of thing, they're going to want to talk to you more often. They're going to want to partner more closely with you. They're going to want to work very closely with you on that. So I think it's a good idea to call up your vendors and discuss your sell-throughs with them. By the way, you could discuss all the other stats we've talked about before this webinar too. Certainly you could talk to them about what your stock-to-sales ratio looks like, what your turns and your days of supply look like. But sell-through is the one that vendors seem to understand better than any other stat. So I would encourage you to have those conversations with them, both the good and the bad. If it's good, what do we do to support this? How do we grow it? How do we make it better, stronger, bigger, etc.? If it's bad, what do we do about it? Did I buy the wrong colors? Am I too broken up in sizes? Is there something they can do to help you? I would definitely encourage you on both sides of that spectrum to have those conversations with the vendors. Okay. Staff discussions. This is selling through great. This is not selling through great. Have them help you identify why. Is there a fit issue? Is that why it didn't go through? Is it in the wrong spot in the store? Are customers picking it up, bringing it to the dressing room, but leaving it in the dressing room? These are all interesting conversations to have with your staff during staff meetings. And just a little sidebar on that one, I really hope you're having at least monthly staff meetings with your staff to talk about how the store is doing, how if they're hitting the goals or not, to discuss these kinds of statistics with them, so that they get sort of your view in terms of what's happening statistically, and you also get input from them on what they're seeing. Okay. Certainly, we want to identify strong, weak sellers and classifications, because that helps you figure out where you're going with this whole thing, and it tells you where you're trending up or trending down. So it tells you what you should do. You know, I was just at a conference. It was actually the Retail Pro conference itself in San Francisco, and the CEO of Retail Pro made an interesting comment. He said the only constant is change, and I think that's important for you to consider as a retailer. Things change on your floor all the time. Things change in your community all the time. Fashions change. Styles change. What's in changes. What's out changes. These things all change, and you've got to watch the trends on these things as important, or more importantly than anything else you're looking at, because trends are predictors of future growth, and if you're on track with those trends, you can actually get some great profitability by capturing those trends early on and making sure that you maximize those trends, maximize that growth, maximize that profitability. So I think sell-through is a place where you can kind of go, wow, that thing got some quick early reaction, and you can pick up some trends, not only in terms of those styles, but maybe those vendors and maybe those classifications. For you, and I thought I'd share this with you. I've been working on this for a little while and talking to some of my accounts about it, and I wanted to share this with you guys and see what your thoughts are on it, and see how you can apply it to your business. So what I'm looking at is not just sell-through of units, but I'm actually looking at a margin sell-through. Okay, so it's a little bit different calculation, but look at this with me and let me know what you think. So let's say from a particular vendor you purchased $3,000 of merchandise at cost. Okay, $3,000 of merchandise at cost. Your planned retail for those goods was $6,500, so a little bit better than 50%, right? So your planned margin was $3,500, or 6,500 minus 3,000 was 3,500. That means I expected to get $3,500 of margin, of profit, that I was going to use to pay for rent, lights, heat, air conditioning, people, systems, advertising, et cetera, bags, boxes, you name it, okay? All right, so what really happens? Well, of that $6,500 at retail that you landed, you sold $3,000 of it at full price. You sold another $2,500 of it at a 40% off sale, which means you only got $1,500 of it, right? You took a $1,000 markdown, okay? And you still have $1,000 at retail. Okay, so what did I really get in terms of cash or sales to me? I got the original $3,000 at full price, and I got the $1,500 that I got during the sale, so I actually got $4,500. Okay, and that's at retail, right? So my planned margin was $3,500. That's what I was hoping to get. That's in that top section, right? I actually got $1,500. Why do I say $1,500? Well, my cash to you, if you look at that line, it was the $4,500 less the $3,000 I spent on those goods. I really got $1,500. Okay? That means that my margin sell-through was 42.8%, or $1,500 divided by $3,500. It was my actual margin divided by my planned margin. I only got 42.8% of the margin I wanted to get. Now, this makes for some really interesting vendor conversations as well, by the way. You can turn to a vendor and say, hey, listen, I spent $3,000 with you guys. I was hoping to sell it for $6,500. I wasn't really particularly being piggy there or out of control. I was just sort of saying, hey, this is what I think I ought to be able to get for those goods. Okay? I only got $1,500 of that, though. So I'm short $2,000. What can you do to help me? Now, some people feel funny about asking that question, like, well, I made the purchase, it's my responsibility. I understand that. You did make the purchase, but you didn't do it alone. The salesperson there put the stuff in front of you, and that's what you got as your margin sell-through. So maybe that vendor can do something to help you. What can they do to help you? Well, maybe they'll offer you some off-price merchandise that you can sell at full margin and make back some of the $2,000 that you lost here. Maybe they'll take back the $1,000 that you still own at retail that you didn't sell through. Maybe they'll do an event in your store. Maybe they'll even give you markdown dollars. There's a lot of things that can happen, but the important point in this whole thing, and the point that I think we really have to emphasize here, is if you don't numerically show this, well, first off, if you don't numerically know it yourself, you can't talk to the vendor about it. You can't say to the vendor, I had a rough season. Your vendor will then say, yeah, it's tough out there, so you might try because next season, we've got some amazing stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I don't think that's where you want to go. Okay, so first, you have to know the stat yourself. The second thing is that you have to give the stats in writing to your vendor. You have to give them reports and analysis that show exactly the case that you're making. Hey, I wanted $3,500. I only got 15. What can we do? Because your vendor will then take that piece of paper that you've given them and take it back to their boss and say, look, I have an account. This is what happened. Is there anything we can do for them? And you don't have to ask that question in a mean way. You don't have to bang your fist on the table and demand it. You can say, hey, listen, you know what? I wanted to get $3,500. I got $1,500. What can you do for me? How can you help me? Sometimes you'd be amazed at what they can actually do to help you. There's more they can do to help you than you would suspect. So give that a try. And these are all statistics that are available in all the point-of-sale systems that you get from OneStep. So this is all stuff that you guys can do. And obviously, if you need help putting that together, contact OneStep or contact me, and we can tell you where to find that stuff, and we can get that stuff cooking for you. But it's important to measure these things. These are the places where cash leaks out of your business, where you can find more cash to put back into your business, or to take out for yourselves, or to grow, or to expand new product lines, or that kind of thing. And the sell-through percentage is an important place to determine where should I grow. Those are all indicators of where the market is going, and to the degree that you can keep pace with where the market is going is to the degree that you can actually sell more, get more profits, make your business healthier, reduce debt, maybe add locations, maybe add staff, maybe build your e-commerce business. These are all these statistics that we're going through are there to help you do those kinds of things so that your business can improve and continue to flourish. So there you go. All right. That's all I really have to say about sell-through. I realize it's shorter than the other ones, but you know what? It's a pretty simple statistic. It's what did I have available to sell, and then how much of that did I actually sell through. So, Donna, let's open up the floor to questions, and let's see what we can help people answer.
Okay. So as people scramble to fill in their questions on their, we've got a couple here. Karen wants to know, should you include carryover inventory in calculating sell-through percentage?
It's an interesting question. I think the thing about carryover is, well, on the one hand, you could say it is an inventory that's available to sell, so I probably would count it to that degree. Obviously, though, if you've been monitoring your sell-through as well through the whole season and you've been really talking to your vendors, I am not a big fan of carryover inventory, by the way. So if you've got, I had one account for a while that, they were, I think, the East Coast champion when it came to black cardigan sweaters, and they had tons of them. The problem with carryover inventory is that you never get your dollars really out of it, and it doesn't slow down your buying any. So I probably would count carryover inventory in that. I think you should. The only reason I wouldn't do it would be if there was some reason for it to if there was some reason not to. In other words, like it was distressed inventory, or it was really inventory that we're just going to have to sell off through eBay or through a liquidator or something like that.
Okay. So we've got a couple questions here that all fall into the same category, which is, well, Cy asks in particular, you did not mention what is a good sell-through percentage, in particular for shoes by brand or category. So is there a benchmark for sell-through percentage?
I have a benchmark that, and obviously sometimes these can change depending on the type of store. For example, if you're the kind of store that brings in inventory from overseas, if you're that type of vendor, then it's harder to say, well, I want to sell this much through per month. But here's what I like to look at in terms of the sell-through. I tell people to do this one just because of cash flow. I like to say, I'd like to sell through at least half of the inventory within the first 30 days. And the reason I say that is because that way, most of you are on terms with your vendors, and most of those are net 30 terms, and so I'd like to be able to pay those bills easily, so I'd like to sell through half of it within the first 30 days if I can. There are other industry standards. As an example, for those of you that are selling licensed products, especially if you go out and you get stuff that's based on films and that kind of stuff, the industry standard there is to be 75% sold through within 6 weeks. That's what their expectation is there. So it does vary a little bit from industry to industry. It depends on how the goods are brought into the store. But a good benchmark is half of it sold through within the first 30 days.
Okay. So you would include shoes in that?
I would include shoes in that, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Matt would like some advice on negotiations here. He says, what would you recommend when trying to contact the vendor about this? Would you go through your vendor rep or go straight to the vendor themselves?
You probably have to start with the rep, I would imagine. And then if that doesn't work, I wouldn't be afraid to go to the vendor themselves. Different vendors view that different ways. There are some vendors that want the information to come through a different group than the actual sales rep. You also have to assess whether or not the sales rep is the kind of sales rep that's going to bring that back to the vendor. And I don't mean to speak, out of turn about sales reps, but some of them, are only interested in moving to the next season and figuring out what your order is going to be and get your goods placed, that kind of thing, and they're not so much wrapped up in that. And that's usually true of, especially when you're talking about independent sales reps. But if it's a sales rep that works for the company, that's involved in how that vendor is going to merchandise next season and what do they think their styles need to look like for next season, et cetera, that's, I would start there, and if that doesn't work, then I'd go to the rep's boss on that.
Okay. So Lindsay says, I'm a store that's special order. So is there a way I should be reviewing these numbers for my samples?
In a special order kind of store, let me make sure I have that right. In a special order kind of store, I think if the whole store is special order, then sell-through is going to be 100% typically, right? But it's usually not that way. I think you almost have to view, it would depend on the store. If there's I would look at the departments that are special order. Sometimes it's only some departments. If it's all departments, then you've got to, it may make sense to pull out the special order business from the just what you're carrying on the floor to sell through, and do it that way. Because special orders they almost stack the deck in the other direction. They make it look better than it really is. But a special order is not the same as a just what you sort of on your own decided to buy and put on the floor and hope that your customers buy it. So I'd probably pull the special order business out of my sell-through calculations.
Okay. Kind of an unusual situation there.
Yeah,
so we have Jan with us again who says, what about book sales?
Books do tend to have a slower sell-through, but having said that, the interesting thing about books nowadays is that with the demise of some of these monster booksellers out there, books, especially in gift stores, have been very, very good sellers for us. And so they're actually beating some of these sell-through percentages. The types of books that are selling really well are inspirational books, and funny books are selling really well. I actually just got it was my birthday earlier this month, and I got this book, F for Effort, and it's a hilarious book of what people have answered tests with. And in talking to some of my stores about that book, they just can't keep that book on the shelves. It sells through almost as fast as it lands. So books have a tendency to sell slower, but we're starting to see that that's changing. It kind of speaks to what I was talking about earlier in terms of how trends shift and things change and that kind of stuff. Books used to be much, much, much slower than they are right now, but again, with the demise of the larger booksellers, they're becoming popular again. And in actual fact, some stores are selling books as greeting cards. If they're, obviously they're not gigantic coffee table books. But sometimes a book with the right sentiment does as good a job of expressing that sentiment as any greeting card does, and so they become they're given almost like greeting cards. So I wouldn't change this in terms of books. I think still 50% within the first 30 days is the right number.
Okay. And of course, let's make the point here that for all these, really specific questions that people have about their store, Dan is a retail consultant. You can call him and talk to him particularly about your store and your situation. That's what he's available to do. That's what he does in his off time when he's not being on television.
That's right.
So we're going to sort of wrap it up here. I think we should bring up the fact that next week is sort of the granddaddy, the GMROI. Want to mention something about that?
Yeah, well, next, I didn't change the screen. I apologize. Whoops.
Oh.
So the next webinar is actually the 23rd, right? A week from today, and we're going to talk about GMROI, gross margin return on investment. It is, to my mind, the most important of all of these statistics, and the reason I say that is because GMROI kind of does what I was doing in that earlier slide when I was talking a little bit about margin sell-through. GMROI looks at what did you invest and how much profit did you get out of your investment. So, some of these other statistics like turn become, units to units or dollars to dollars, and stock to sales can be that way. The interesting thing for me about GMROI is I think it's the best measure of how well you did in your investment in inventory. And measuring that one and improving that one is something you are most definitely going to feel on the bottom line, most definitely feel in your profitability, most definitely feel in how your store looks and how it performs. So if there was one stat that you should focus on more than any other, it is without question GMROI. So I will certainly have a lot to say about that one. You guys have come to learn that I'm certainly not short of opinion when it comes to retailing and how that stuff works. And I think that that'll be a very entertaining webinar for you and very helpful to you, to your business. So I hope that not only you turn in, that you show up for it, but you invite your other friends who are in retail to show up for it as well. And then the week after that one, we're going to go back through all the statistics again and help you develop a strategy for how to implement this into your business and make it work for your business so that you can become more profitable, more successful, because that's all that One Step cares about. That's all I care about. And we know that's something that's important to you guys.
Exactly.
So Donna, thanks again for the opportunity to do these with you guys. It's continues to be great fun, and I really strongly value my partnership and my relationship with One Step. And let me go. Maybe I'll go back and put the previous slide up there just for the last couple of minutes here. If you guys want to contact either Donna or me, that's how to get a hold of us, and we're here to help you.
Exactly. And that is going to be exciting when we get to the end of this and how to bring it all together, because I think, that's where many of us get stuck. We know the formulas now, and we have some idea of what we're looking at, but what does it all mean, and what do we do with it from there when we bring them all together? That's going to be, I think it's going to be very exciting. So GMROI next week, and then bringing it all together in the end. I thank you very much, Dan, for getting us through this today, and one more under our belt to think with, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.